Justin, we're not overreacting here, are we? I mean,
No,
I
no, no, no. And look, and let's again. I said this in the Copeland versus Penta, a very fun opener. Just before that, hot start to having Joe
yes,
immediately get attacked by Swerve. Like you know, Thunder and Tony Storm, which would have been a little bit longer, but still, like, quick, keeping heat and momentum to their like
Shibata. I laughed out
the
loud with
translator.
Shibata. Yeah, that
Yes,
was amazing.
there were positives on the show. So right now, so as people are listening and as the phone lines are filling up, and I want to hear from some of the most diehard AEW fans. I want to hear from their perspective. This is not just a AEW can only do wrong. There were some really good things to enjoy. The problem is they are so overshadowed by the by the bad things that they decided. This wasn't like, oh, the show slipped on a banana peel. Oh, this was, they had technical difficulties. Oh, it's like Halloween Havoc where they went off the air before they could get to finish it. It wasn't like anything like that. Everything that was wrong about this Dynamite and bad was advertised and done on purpose.
Yep,
They actively
self-inflicted.
went to the show and produced the bad. That's
Justin,
that's what's so stunning about this.
and it's so incredible because, again, going back to last week and Adam Copeland's speech in the middle of that ring, I won't even call it a promo because I felt like that was like a statement that I was like, wow. And everybody praised it. Nobody was going off on that. Everybody was like, we needed to hear that. Thank God for that. That's exactly what, especially the WrestleMania week, where we always say it's a celebration of pro wrestling. For Adam Copeland, for AEW Dynamite to step up in that way, take the high road and say, hey, we got to end this bullshit. And then to put on the show that they did last night. Like I said, it took just a steamy, stinky shit on everything that Adam Copeland said last week on that show. And like you said, it was self-inflicted because, quite honestly, Justin, if they would just focus on what they have to do, if they would just focus on Dynasty in 2 weeks, if they would just stay in their lane and just worry about AEW and not worry about WWE, my God, we would be talking about a completely different show last night. It's just like, get over it. Get over it. Move on. And it just feels like AEW and Tony Khan just won't get over it.
And what I'd love to know is how many people in that company, how many people that were in that building last night, and I'm talking in the building as if with AEW, not fans, but people there working. How many people felt that this was a good idea going into it? Never mind after the fact, but before, how many people, when they showed up to work in the afternoon that day at the building, thought, yeah, this is going to go well? Versus, what the ratio was versus, we know there's one person who absolutely wanted to do it, and that's the guy who signs off on what's going on the TV show. That's the boss, and Tony Khan. And it's like, we, as wrestling fans, every fan, of course, that same old question. If you won the lottery, what would you do? It's a common thing for a wrestling fan to probably say, if I won the lottery, I'd start my own wrestling company, right? Well, so Tony Khan has the money. His family has the money. He started his own wrestling company. And there's there's a lot of good for that in terms of getting people employed, good pay, competitive pay in the market. Like, there's a lot of, again, I'm trying to be fair on the positives, but it can't be denied that now that in this situation specifically, as this Dynamite that we're talking about, that you are a passionate fan with your own show. You got to have some vision. You got to have some awareness. You got to have some ears to listen to some people that at times are going to be smarter and more level-headed than you. You can't take an interview from a guy who no longer works for you because you fired him. You can't take an interview that makes you look bad and foolish and calls you a clown. You can't take it personal on a public level to the point of where you take your valuable television minutes to try to fire back only to embarrass yourself. And as you said a second ago, to shit on the positives that the men and women that are working for you went out and did. Like, it's just, he's got. he's got to get some levels of separation. I know he's never going to fully separate himself and just be in the owner's box and hire a GM. I'm using a sports metaphor. Hire a GM just to book and put all the pieces. I know that he's never going to be that far removed. He's too passionate. I get it, but he has got to get. And frankly, Dave, I think he has it there. He has so many great veterans. Adam Copeland that we're talking about at nauseam. So many, Christian Cage. He's got so many veterans there that have done, that have been to the top of the mountain in the business. Listen to them. Let them be your buffer. Let them be your filter. Bryan Danielson. But it's clear that he is just, nope.
Yeah, and again, if you want to listen, I get it. He heard that CM Punk interview, Justin, and he was probably pissed off and he was probably upset. I can understand that. I can relate to that. Well, then go on Ariel Helwani's show and talk about that situation. Go on, any other show that would have you and talk about that situation. Come on, Bust It Open. You used to do a weekly with us and talk about that. Don't talk about it on your show, because when you present it on your show, you would hope that there's going to be people that are watching that don't know what you're talking about. Maybe they didn't watch the interview with Ariel Helwani. Maybe they're the AEW faithful that wants to get past this and doesn't care about that. If you want to express yourself, I get it. I understand it. If you want to counter what CM Punk said, I can understand it. Well, do it in the same avenue that CM Punk did it. WWE is not talking about AEW on Monday Night Raw or on SmackDown on Friday night. These were interviews where those talents were asked questions by people, by Ariel Helwani and by Pat McAfee. They are just answering those questions that were asked of them. They are not putting it on WWE programming. There is no reason to have the counter on AEW programming.
Yeah, no, Dave, that's a great point. You're right. WWE has been smart and strategic in they will take little shots or they will make statements to reaffirm their supremacy in the business at the moment. But you're right. They do it when asked about it on a Pat McAfee show on ESPN on a big platform. They do it if brought up in the pressers that are put on WWE's digital platforms. They don't waste valuable Raw and SmackDown time to dedicate segments. When, quite frankly, if they have 2 million people, whatever it is, watching, more than half the people watching aren't probably not going to know what the hell they're referencing anyways.
A perfect point is that when Punk was doing his promo in front of the crowd when he returned to WWE, he made a couple of little small shots, under the radar in front of a crowd, and it got no reaction. Why? Because most of the WWE universe doesn't watch wrestling in that way.
Right.
And then he saw it, got no reaction. He moved on, and that was the last you ever heard of it, because he never did it again. Because now you're playing to the very small vocal minority that doesn't add up to a big audience. Last night, AEW spoke to the very small internet audience. And that's why, as you said earlier, Justin, they did that show in front of a little over 2,000 people last night instead of doing it in an arena full of 10 or 15,000 people. Because lately, you're playing to a very small, ultra hardcore pro wrestling audience.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the larger picture of, look, any business you're in. I'm not going to fight over TV ratings. I understand that people cutting the cord. I understand there's a lot of different measurements of how people watch. Some people just consume it via YouTube clips, whatever. But the number one thing you can't deny, the number one metric, as long as there's not a global pandemic going on, the number one metric that's always going to be fair, especially in pro wrestling, is live attendance. How are you drawing in the towns? Are you getting people to come out? And then generally in business, in most businesses, you're looking at year over year. Are we doing better than we were in this time of year last year with the same variables, same time of year, same competition on TV, et cetera, et cetera? And their year over year continues to go down. And that's the overall conversation and issue. And then it's like, oh, why? Well, then okay, then dive into last night's Dynamite if you want to know why.
That's going to be the perfect example. And I have a feeling, unfortunately, Justin, that last night's show is a show that's going to be talked about 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now, and for the wrong reasons. Justin, I know we've asked this question a lot today. Why? Why would you even go there? Why? I mean, first of all, I didn't see any of these so-called rumors about Will Ospreay. I didn't. Now, listen, to be fair, I was crazy busy WrestleMania weekend with everything that was going on, but I didn't see any of these rumors or innuendos that Triple H was talking specifically about Will Ospreay. So, and again, if there were rumors and innuendos, once again, you're talking to a very, very small, minute audience that was talking about that to begin with.
Yeah, I didn't. Again, I didn't connect that's who Triple H was referencing. First off, I just say this: I don't know. Was this Will Ospreay's words, or was he told to say this? I don't know that. Here's the thing, you know, Cody, when he was in AEW, famously took the sledgehammer to the throne, right? Kind of some, symbolizing Triple H's weapon and his, and his throne. And there's one thing in wrestling to do things with gimmicks and what have you. It is a whole other thing when you make that about a man, his job, and then his wife and the mother of his children. That's something that's hard to come back from. And so I started by saying whose words were they? Because you know what? Somewhere down the line, maybe, if Will Ospreay ever did want to be in WWE, these words might come back to really harm him and what that result would be. And whether it was his words or if he was told to say it, and if he was told to say it, that I think he's going to regret that. Maybe he already does, but and then an assassin with a machine gun. You're talking about the guy who is booking the #1 company in the world in pro wrestling, and you're going up against him in a war of words apparently. And I don't even know if he knew he was talking about you, but you're the assassin with a machine gun. Come on, you're. Will Ospreay is a great pro wrestler, and he's put on some great matches and been very exciting to watch in AEW. Not taking that away from him, but you're the assassin with a machine gun against the biggest booker right now in the world. I mean, come on now, come on.
It was wrong in so many different ways, Justin. First and foremost, if you want to counter that, again, go on a show. Go on Pat McAfee's show if Pat McAfee wants you on his show as a guest. Come here on Busted Open and say, hey, you know what? There were some rumors and innuendos that Triple H was speaking about me. Well, if he was speaking about me, here's the honest truth. I travel all the time, yada, yada, yada. You want to do that? That's fine. The way Will Ospreay did that last night, you couldn't be more lowbrow than the way Will Ospreay attacked that last night. You talk about somebody's wife? Like, dude, you and I could be having a disagreement, Justin, and you could be justified in what you're saying. You bring my daughter or you bring my wife into that conversation, now all bets are off. Now you cross the line. And I believe Will Ospreay crossed that line. The only thing you accomplish is grinding against the boss's daughter. Dude, that's fucked up, man. I'm sorry, but that was... I hope Will Ospreay regrets saying those things this morning because that was about as lowbrow as you could possibly go.
Well, it's lowbrow again, mentioning a man's wife and the mother of his children, but like, it's not like the Triple H booking. So Triple H is in the position he's in. It's not like he's in the position he's in, and like he's getting overwhelming negative reaction of God, this guy is failing in his chief content role. The company is thriving.
They had the biggest WrestleMania of all time, and some fans are saying that night number 2 of WrestleMania was the best WrestleMania night of all time. Nobody's complaining about what happened this past weekend in Philadelphia.
It's just, once again, and again, we've seen this with AEW, and a lot about this episode, but we've seen this in the past with the way that again, they respond to pettiness or the way they take things personal. It's like, read the room. I mean, how tone deaf can you be? Like, really? That's, again, as he says it in the promo, you have valuable TV minutes, and that's what you're gonna what he's doing, and we when we talked earlier about looking at Tony Schiavone's face when they came out of the backstage footage, Renee didn't look super comfortable as soon as he said that standing next to her. So last night's episode, again, there were some good things in there, but you have to scrape aside a whole pile of shit to get to it.
And again, Triple H didn't name Will Ospreay by name, and he didn't do it on WWE programming. He did it in response to a question that was asked on a talk show. So everybody wants people to be honest, but when they're honest, they get upset. Triple H was being honest. Hey, there's some people that didn't sign because, you know what? Maybe being a WWE superstar, the grind, the schedule. Hell, there's people that have been very, very open, Justin, that said, hey, the reason I signed with AEW is because the schedule is so much better than the WWE schedule. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in that at all. So if that's the reason why, but again, he was not named. Will Ospreay was not named in that interview. But now you're using, as Will Ospreay said, to your point, Justin, he said, hey, Tony Khan said, I'm giving you 5 minutes of TV time and it's expensive. And you use that time once again to knock a guy that a lot of people are calling the savior of pro wrestling in Triple H. Like, why do you feel the need to go there? Again, if you want to go tick for tack and say, hey, you know what? I'll go on Pat McAfee's show and say it. If I want to go on Busted Open and talk about the quote-unquote rumor, and I didn't see it anywhere. And Justin, if there were rumors, that's, again, a very vocal, small minority of people that are talking about it.
Well, and also, again, in recent history, they've signed Mercedes Moné. They've signed Will Ospreay. They've signed Okada. So you can make the case that any of them are maybe who Triple H has in mind. If WWE was involved in any negotiations with any of those three, so meaning the talent had the choice to make, and they said, you know what, I'm going here because of the schedule. So again, to single out and put it on, to have Will Ospreay be singled out again, whether it was his or whether he was told to say it, it just puts a bad light on Will Ospreay. And you're right earlier. What you said, there's no shame in saying that, the schedule was lighter and that was more appealing, especially. But you do this again, not on Dynamite. You do this in a podcast. You do this in a sit down in a longer form situation where you explain it to say, I like the lighter schedule because I'd get paid. It can be on Dynamite and Collision, but AEW allows us to do other things, so we're able to go to some independent shows, to some conventions, whatever, where I'm able to make that money and I don't have to split, like you can explain business wise, why it makes sense, in addition to personal and being able to be at home more or what have you. So like, there's a way to explain that if you really want to respond to these comments that you seem so offended by, but doing it in that tight format on TV out of the blue, it makes no sense.
And Justin, I go a little bit of a different way with things, and I'll just use it in our forum, in our world. So just to make an example out of it and compare, I never come on the air and bash any other wrestling shows, any other wrestling podcast. I never do that. I just don't. I'll praise it. I'll promote JR's podcast, Tony Schiavone's, Bruce Pritchard's, Jim Cornette's, whatever you like. I have no problem doing it. I don't look at those shows as competition because we kind of live in a different world, and I want everybody to really like thrive in this pro wrestling community. Hell, Justin, I reached out to you to be a part of this show, because I want it to be diverse. I want everybody to have a voice. I want an older audience. I want a younger audience. I want everything. I will always talk positive about other podcasts, but I'll use this as an example. One, Vince Russo. Vince Russo, when it comes to pro wrestling, do not see eye to eye. We don't. We couldn't have different opinions than the ones that we have about pro wrestling. So what did I do, Justin? I invited Vince Russo onto my air, and we talked about it. And we talked about it, and he disagreed with me about Cody. He disagreed with me about the WWE. And then what did Vince Russo put out? A tweet where he mentioned me about how Cody Rhodes got him. And he was wrong. And that takes somebody to be like, hey, I was wrong about this situation. And Vince Russo did that, and he gets my respect and credit for that. Another one I'll bring up is Conan and Disco Inferno. Disco Inferno has been very vocal about me being a Cody crybaby. He's mentioned me on the show. He's mentioned me on Twitter, and that's fine. He's entitled to his opinion. But what did Conan and Disco Inferno do? They didn't just talk about me on their show. They didn't just tweet about me. They invited me on their podcast, and we talked about it. And we talked about it, and we disagreed about it. But they opened up the door, and they let me in, and they invited me on their show. And you know what? Conan came to our show at the Victory Beer Garden on Thursday. We shook hands. We had a hug. And he even said to me, he goes, Dave, we don't see eye to eye, but I respect you. And I said, man, I respect you. You're a legend. Thank you for giving me the time on your air. That's how you do it. That's how, if you're going to use the time, only use the time if the other person gets a time to talk about it. Again, CM Punk didn't talk bad about AEW on WWE programming. That interview was on Ariel Helwani. This interview, the only reason why Triple H talked about it was because it was asked on the Pat McAfee show. Now you're using valuable time on Dynamite. And why? How does that make you look good, Will Ospreay? You're the ultimate babyface. Everybody loves you right now. And you're going to spend the time to get more over by putting down Triple H right after the most successful WrestleMania in history? Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just going to say right there. That is what, aside from the future ramifications that could have to Ospreay's career, if and when he's never in AEW again, if he wanted to venture elsewhere, but also like you just said, he's one of their most over baby faces right now. So that's why part of me goes, was he told to say this? If it was my company and I wanted to lash out and respond to this, who am I going to have say these words that I want out there that I think the crowd might respond to the most? So you put the new babyface out there. And so that's why I wonder. And again, it's so, low rent, low brow, out of nowhere, like what you didn't just sell me on, again, spending $50 to see Osprey, and like you did none of that. You did none of that. All you did is make him sound ridiculous. Oh, I'm an assassin with a machine gun, and you're only the booker because of who your wife. Like what?
That is,
what?
I mean, Triple H has done the most with WWE that we could say about WWE in over 25 years.
Yeah.
Over 25 years. And if it was Will Ospreay's idea to say that, if he was so upset by what Triple H had to say and he took it personal, then that's Tony Khan's job to say, listen, we got a pay-per-view coming up in a couple of weeks. Now is not the time. You want to go on your social media and say something. You want to go on a talk show and say something. You're not using my TV time to say that. You're over with the crowd. These fans love you. There's no reason to go there. No good happens with going out there and saying that. Let's focus on what we're doing here. Knock it out of the park. Go talk about your match with Daniel Bryan.
So either way, whether it's that, what you just said, whether it was Will Ospreay who wants to say that, and he just did that, whether it's that and Tony let it, or whether it's Tony wanted to be said and telling Ospreay to do it, either way, it feeds back into what Punk was just saying, which is this isn't being ran like a business. This isn't being ran by somebody who's being a clear-cut boss. This is, like the decisions are being made based upon the wrong reasons.